senza un perché, ma siamo tutti futuri probabili. Siamo tutti futuri probabili.
Più si va avanti, più la tecnologia prende ogni Stato vuole conquistare gli altri, quindi spesso ci saranno più guerre.
Ci saranno dei fattori che causano una maggiore ingordigia, una avidità.
Lo spazio è anche molto importante, diventerà anche più importante fra 20 anni perché ci sarà la rete 6G, ora siamo ancora a 4G, sta venendo il 5G, poi verrà il 6G, piano piano verrà il 7G, l'8G eccetera, in base agli Starlink mandati nello spazio.
Però tra 20 anni vorrei anche alzare gli occhi al cielo, come tutti quanti penso, e vedere ancora le stelle, i pianeti.
Sicuramente Elon Musk potrebbe ricattare anche paesi, interi paesi, per esempio togliendo internet, perché ormai noi viviamo solamente di questo, cioè noi le notizie che riceviamo, anche semplicemente notizie di terremoti, calamità naturali, cioè noi tutto ciò che riceviamo lo riceviamo da internet.
Le persone quando vedono su social vedono anche cose che non so vere.
Che Musk sia più potente d'Italia è molto spaventoso, perché pensare che un'intera popolazione, magari un intero gruppo politico sia inferiore a un solo essere umano è molto pericoloso, più che spaventoso.
Se Elon Musk possedesse tutto ciò che è la telecomunicazione potrebbe anche portare interi paesi dalla sua parte, creare anche delle guerre, cioè fino adesso le guerre sono state per problemi economici, territoriali, oppure anche per delle risorse, per lo sfruttamento delle risorse, oppure per la religione. In futuro potrebbero esserci delle guerre per il possesso della telecomunicazione.
Allora, questa cosa che ci osservano secondo me non è tanto giusta, però noi tipo quando compriamo delle cose sappiamo che c'è una fotocamera e corriamo quel rischio, quindi potrebbe essere anche colpa nostra.
Tutto dalla camera foto all'audio, al GPS, al pedometro del nostro telefono, che indica tutto praticamente, il nostro respiro, il battito del cuore. Se abbiamo tipo le applicazioni di fitness attive può rilevare anche la pressione del sangue, tutte queste cose qua. In base a tutte quelle informazioni, al contenuto che tu vedi sul telefonino o sul computer, lui può generare delle statistiche in modo che si rende conto cosa ti piace, cosa non ti piace.
Quando vediamo un video che ci piace e lo rivediamo per più di una volta, il social capisce che quel video ci ha catturato di più l'attenzione, ci ha catturato maggiormente, e che quindi ce lo ripropone altri video di un genere simile.
Genitori futuri, se sono stati influenzati troppo dai social, allora non porteranno una buona educazione e porteranno i figli a essere disorientati in qualsiasi strada che prendono.
La mancanza di prospettive e la meno voglia di studiare da parte dei giovani, che si ritirano anche prima dalla scuola, decidono di non affrontare studi dopo il liceo.
Riconosco anch'io di essere oramai schiavo, tra virgolette, del telefono.
In generale sul telefono anche 10 ore.
C'è pure gente che gioca pure 24 su 24.
Penso che se i videogiochi diventeranno più realistici, ci potrebbe essere la possibilità che le persone smettono di vivere la realtà, perché ad esempio un videogioco che permette di avere, non lo so, una famiglia all'interno del videogioco, e il videogioco allo stesso tempo ti dà la possibilità di sentire tutte le stesse sentimenti che ti dà la realtà, una persona potrebbe tendere a isolarsi perché nel videogioco è al sicuro.
Secondo me la dipendenza si può creare quando non trovi delle cose che ti piacciono oltre al telefono, cioè non hai dei tuoi hobby.
comprano la PS5, mi comprano i regali, sì, sono felice e non male, però quando mi comprano una lente di un telescopio oppure puntano la luna, sono felicissimo, cioè la luna is my love, is my life.
Tra 20 anni non so bene quello che farò, però mi piacerebbe studiare l'astrofisica, poiché mio padre è astrofisico e mi ha trasmesso questa passione. Agli altri bambini da piccoli raccontavano le favole, a me mi raccontava cos'era l'universo.
Siamo tutti futuri probabili.
So I thank the Association Probable Futures, in particular my dear friend Marco Casu, for having let us see this, use this video, which they've produced for the Osaka Expo this year. We've listened to voices of young people, of kids, about our future, our probable future. They were discussing about words that today we hear more: war, space, algorithms, generations, limits, passions. It's really from these ideas, these themes, that we want to start getting into this difficult theme, but that's certainly relevant, that of the cognitive warfare, and to understand better what we mean by this expression, which can sound a bit strange. Given that we started with some youngsters listening to school-aged kids, I want to very briefly recount to you a story that was written by a teacher, who's Gianni Rodari. He wrote this in 1962. One day, I knock at a strange guy knocks at our door. He had a bag in his hand that was bigger than him. "I've got some cars to see," he said. "Well, have a look," says Dad. "This is a machine for doing homework. You press the red button and the yellow button to write your essays, green button to learn geography. The machine does everything by itself in 1 minute. But buy it for me, Dad." He said, "Okay, how much do you want?" "I don't want money," he says, the little man. "So surely you don't work for nothing." "No. Instead, in exchange, I want the brain of your child." "But you're crazy," I exclaimed the dad. "Listen," said the man, smiling. "If the machine does the homework, what do you need a brain for?" "Buy my machine," says the child. "Buy the machine. What do I need a brain for?" Dad looks at me and he says, Okay. Get his brain. The man took my brain, put it in his bag. How I was light without my brain. And I so light that I seemed to float around. And if my dad hadn't grabbed me, I'd have floated away from the window. "So you need to keep him in a cage," said the man. "Why?" said the dad. "Because he's got no brain. So if you let him go around, he'll float around in the woods like a bird, and then he'll starve. So you need to lock him in a cage like a canary, a narrow little cage. The bars were pushing me, and in the end they scared me, and so I woke up. Thank goodness it was only a dream, and so I straight away went to do my homework." 1962, this child wrote the story. Today, we live in a world in which the nightmare of that child, the machine that does your homework, is basically downloadable for free on the internet. Digital tech that has evolved so rapidly, so quickly, so pervasive, that many activities that we thought were exclusive for human beings, studying, knowing, judging, deciding, in a word, thinking, that these could be done by machines. This means that if a machine can substitute my thought, can replace it, that machine, sooner or later, will capture also my freedom. So for centuries, we've asked technology to do that which we wanted, which we desire. Today, we ask it what we desire. This creates a new risk of domination, of slavery, or a possibility of liberation. Pope Leo said to the young people at Tor Vergata for the vigil of the Jubilee, He said, today there are algorithms that tell us what we must see, what we must think, and who should be our friends. And so our relationships become confused, sometimes anxious. And that when the instrument dominates man, man becomes a tool. He becomes the instrument of a market. He becomes goods to be sold in his own turn. So discussing these terms about this scenario in which we live. So we've got three exceptional guests today with very different histories among themselves, but each have accumulated, each have in common a great faithful friendship with those who proposed the meeting. First of all, to whom we owe the choice of this theme, because he's been working for a long time on this, and he's very deeply involved in this, both is the President Luciano Violante. Luciano has a public curriculum that's is frankly far beyond what I could present here. But he's a magistrate, president emeritus of the Chamber of Deputies, and certainly is a great protagonist of our life, political life and cultural life. And in recent years, he's been working very hard on the future together with friends. And this is why we have this Probable Futures Foundation, from whom we borrowed the video. The second guest is linked by video. We hope we'll be able to see. Yeah, we can see him. There he is. He's Professor Paolo Carozza from the University of Notre Dame. He's linked by video from the US. Today we also have Notre Dame professors on both sides, so both in front on the screen, and Professor Denin, who was here. Paolo teaches at the University of Notre Dame. He's a great friend, my personal friend, and of the meeting. I've checked his first recorded participation was in 2007 in a meeting about law in the US, together with Samuel Alito from the Supreme Court. Paolo is a professor of constitutional law, international law, human rights, and comparative law, but in the last few years, he's picked up a new professional adventure. He's currently the co-chair of the Oversight Board, which is an organism created by Meta, the people who are behind Instagram and Facebook and WhatsApp, a board to regulate the content that are loaded up onto the platforms. So this last few years, he's really lived inside this theme of the new technologies. And yet finally, last but not least, Professor Mauro Magatti. He's the professor at Università of Catholic University of the Sacro Cuore. He too is a friend for ages of the meeting. His first appointment in the meeting was 2011, a bit after Paolo, but still there. He's an authoritative writer in newspapers in Italy. In recent years, he's been a protagonist about together with his wife, the Professor Magatti, of many volumes which look into this theme, this transition. Which last one was published today. Which is celibate machines, which has stuff to do with what we're talking about today. So let's start straight away. Luciano. So you decided to shine a light on this cognitive liberty, which is the thing we want to talk about today. Can you help us to introduce it? And then we'll follow to study on. Thank you. Sorry. In our habits as people of the West, in public opinion, the public opinion of citizens is a great motor of the development of democracy. We think we figure out what people think, what the public thinks, and the governing classes are organize themselves and direct themselves based on this. So Aldo Moro once said, we need to listen to public opinion, but we also need to have the responsibility to orientate public opinion. We can't just listen to it, otherwise you're not a leader, you're a follower. You're just someone who follows public opinion, what the others think. So the important thing, this is important because we need that each one of us should freely form their own opinion, freely, without constrictions. When we read, when we see news, toothpaste advert, we know whether they're trying to sell us toothpaste, and so on. And it's a propaganda, if you like. It's not subtle. And if somebody, a politician, tells you how good the stuff that they've done is, they know that they're trying to get our agreement, to get our vote. But what comes through the digital media, through the social medias, isn't this clear? Isn't this obvious? Think that in 2016, the government of Burma, of Myanmar, created some sites with images of sports stars, movie stars, singers, etc., from their people, who made violent declarations against a minority population within their country. And so this started to grow hate against these people. And then, at a certain point, somebody realized and asked Facebook, what's going on? And Facebook said, this has nothing to do with us. It's the government of Burma who created these things, these mechanisms, to change public opinion against the Horungis. So this manipulation of public opinion. And so every technology in history, and there's a great sociologist with us who can explain it better than I can, every new technology has the opportunities and risks. The automobile, you can go from here to there, or you can kill somebody. Aeroplane, it takes you in a certain road, or it can fall, etc. All these problems of technology, it's not stopping technology, but governing it. This is the theme. Doing it in a way that it doesn't cause damages. So when the first cars came to London, a car hit a lady, hurt her, and the mayor of London decided that every car should be preceded by somebody with a red flag in front of them, saying that here's a car coming, so a runner with a red flag. You can see this wasn't practical as a solution. So this is a way to not understand that technology needs to be governed. And the risk that we have is that our freedom to create an opinion would be polluted. And I'll finish here. There are three risks we can talk about. First is that there's no separation between digital power and political power. That is, digital power and political power takes away. If political power takes away the rules of the digital power, the digital power, in its own way, can do electoral campaigns, false ones, but for themselves, but so that the electorate will help them or against their opponents. The second great danger is disinformation. And maybe I'll say more about how you can defend yourself against it. The third danger is the new one is conditioning your own brain by technology. An association of Musk has constructed, and not only them, a mechanism that you stick it in people's head, in their skull. It was developed for a paraplegic, and with great success, because this paraplegic could start with words, he could do gestures, he could started to be able to use the computer and so on. So, very positive. But this is good for paraplegics, but also not for. They did it for others, so that. But then they tried to do it on a healthy person, and they said no. This experiment it needs to be changed. We need to decide that everybody has the right to cognitive liberty, to freely acquire their own opinion, because with that mechanism in your brain, you could start to convince people to buy toothpaste, one or another, or to follow this with politician or whatever. And so these three things, I think, are the bigger risks that we follow now. So the question of government and learning, education, we need to teach people how to use these instruments. And how you learn to drive a car, you need to learn how to use this tech. Thank you. Okay, so Luciano has helped us to place the theme, the key themes on the table in front of us. So, how are opinions formed? The freedom of forming your opinion, undoubtedly now, maybe the most widespread instrument is the analytics. These are the great technology platforms. These are the key things. Professor Carozza, in these years, he's found himself really as an observatory, a particular viewpoint, you could say within, also external, but in terms of independence, but he's really deeply inside this phenomenon. So I wanted to really ask him to give us his point of view on these themes. What's at play here? This cognitive liberty. What does this evoke for us, Paolo? Thank you. Thank you, and thank you for your invitation. My only disappointment is that I can't be there with you in person, because I'd love to share this environment with you, this experience, but also it's a bit ironic that I would presume to speak about the risks and problems of the digital sphere only by appearing before you through digital means. Anyway, I'm glad to be able to take part in this discussion, because the topic is so important for our lives and our futures, with an urgency that is growing every day. AI and algorithmic technologies are really generating a world of new things, of rerum novarum. They are unleashing astonishing power and vast, rapid changes in every aspect of our lives. No aspect of human life remains intact, and it's exactly because this reason that I think it's insufficient to seek to understand what's going on just simply looking at the manifestations of technology in an isolated sphere or another. We need to go, well, what's at the center of this, of any cultural expression, and ask ourselves, look at the human person. And the technologies of AI are tools, instruments, as we've heard. All these instruments, tools in human history can be used either as ways to help the common good and human development, or as instruments of reduction of human experience and of freedom. The possibilities of AI for contributing to human flourishing are awe-inspiring, and you don't need to be a techno-utopianist to recognize them. Much good can come from these things. And let's be honest, whatever look you have on the state of human today, with any kind of realism, can't fail to acknowledge that we're already witnessing daily before our eyes compelling signs of the way these technologies can also are capable of degradation of human life. This is already very clear, even only with the sphere in which I'm most directly immersed at the Oversight board. That is, that the communications technologies that now overwhelmingly define how we produce, exchange, and receive information. How all of us do that. On one hand, we possess an unprecedented capacity to communicate one with another across time and geographies and languages and cultures to a degree that would have been unimaginable just a few generations ago. And yet, paradoxically, these instruments that are in principle open to the communication of all people and to the enhancement of human expression and encounter, they've also become pervasive instruments of mass influence, more powerful than any others ever. The negative consequences of this aspect, the cases that we're called to deal with on a daily basis in our work, those are deep. and severe. They're inciting violence, manipulating media, disseminating false information, fraud, exploitation, feeding mental health problems, and undermining the well-being of children and youngsters. And at the same time, not to be understated, is the pervasive effort to limit who has access or doesn't have access, which voices are heard and not heard, which ideas are the correct ones that must be amplified, and which should be deplatformed and criminally prosecuted because they are unfashionable or inconvenient. None of these things are new. Disseminating false information and using one's speech to manipulate people or to commit fraud is as old as human civilization. It's an old fact, as old as human civilization. But certain distinctive features of the technologies behind these acts make it extraordinarily hard to contain these problems. For example, the immense scale of the information ecosystem, the velocity of their circulation, the persistence of data over time. And then, most troubling of all, is the way in which the entire fabric, entire digital networks, harnesses massive amounts of personal data and unites them to steer our desires towards someone else's ends, whether they're ideological or economical. This is the danger to our cognitive freedom, which Luciano is identifying rightly and that we're going to talk about today. But what can we do about this? Often we have the instinct of turning directly to the power of state, to the law. After all, the rule of law emerged precisely in order to impose limits on power, to bring responsibility to the exercise of power, and thus to preserve liberty, equality, justice. From this perspective, the answer would lie in new laws, regulations by the state of the powers of social media platforms, of AI companies, and of other actors in the digital sphere. But I think that we should be prudent, careful about this instinctive reflex. Certainly, the law has its role, an essential role, certainly. I wouldn't be in the business of educating, I wouldn't be in the law faculty if I didn't believe in the nobility and necessity of the rule of law for achieving the common good. But to begin from there would be to underestimate the scope, the depth, and the novelty of the challenge that we face today. To be overly focused on the legal, the regulatory, would lead us to overlook and miss what is even more fundamental, because that's the human individual, because this is where Luciano is starting to take us, I think. We need to ask more seriously how the technology being used today influence the basic dimensions of our humanity, not merely seeking better rules and institutions of governance and of responsibility. To offer one example, consider the problems of political polarization. Many studies show very complex relationships between polarization and the role of social media. There's no clear line of causation. But one powerful strand of research suggests that polarization is increased in large part by separating our interactions around political issues from real social networks, in-person social networks, not virtual ones. In other words, the more that people are engaged in online interactions that are decontextualized with people with whom they otherwise would have little or no previous social connections in person, the more it's probable that those interactions are going to lead them to what is called affective polarization. Or to put it more simply, those who have least probability to end up as haters are those whose communications and debates take place in the real world, contextualized, personal exchanges with people with whom they have a broader set of social connections. In short, people who need real relations, looking at the human, we see that people need real relationships, effective, healthy relationships that are diverse in order to be open to reason and to the desire for truth. These researchers suggest an intuition that that answers the problems generated by new technologies, the answer lies, first of all, not in controlling the technology, but in an understanding adequately the human person and the basic constitutive dimensions of what constitutes the human subject, what makes us free beings, reasonable beings, what people are made for. This is an anthropological problem before being a technological problem. And it requires understanding what the human person is, what it is made for, what is his value, in a word, human dignity. So the great challenge we have today is that we live in an era in which the meaning and the content of human dignity has increasingly been reduced to a single dimension, decisional autonomy. Am I free to make unconditioned decisions over the things that I value? Now, certainly, this is a fundamental aspect of a human identity, but an exclusive focus on this is inadequate to understand the risk that contemporary technologies are posing to our humanity. An exclusive focus on an ethic of autonomy leads directly to extreme forms of individualism, of social separation and fragmentation, of absence of responsibility and solidarity, and a narcissistic obsession with personal authenticity. This version of human dignity, which fosters isolated monads who are unconnected with one another, except in certain superficial mediated relationships. Think of the difference between the demands of two real friends and the request of a Facebook friend. This aligns only too easily with the exploitative potential of digital technologies. It fosters a human object all too ready to cooperate, even unknowingly, with the powers of surveillance and the manipulation of desire. So this is you could say it's a version for the digital era of what Hannah Arendt acutely had diagnosed as the origins of totalitarianism in the last century. In order to begin to address the rerum novarum of the digital world, we need to recover and develop a more robust understanding of human dignity, one that's capable of standing up to the new and unprecedented powers of our age. I don't have time to go into details, but in closing, let me say the four dimensions of human dignity that I think we need to be more attentive to if we hope to preserve authentic human freedom, in cognitive and otherwise, in the algorithmic age. Firstly, that human dignity is embodied, incarnate. Our relationship with reality can't be reduced to a mental exercise, but it exists in the flesh, in an integrated mind, body, and spirit. The technology that we're subjected to seeks to substitute an incarnate experience of reality with a mediated one. To give just a concrete example, consider the alarming number of people who are developing romantic attachments to chatbots, and there's negative consequences of this. Second, human dignity is relational. From the time that we're in the womb to the day that we die, we discover, develop, and live out the meaning and value and direction of our lives in relationship with others, through communion, through belonging. Insofar as the technologies that are offered to us claim to substitute isolation for relationship, they threaten human dignity. Thirdly, human dignity requires preserving interiority, or what in the biblical tradition was referred to as the heart. Not the heart in the diminished sense of the seat of sentimentalism, emotion, and irrationality, but the heart as representing the human capacity to seek the meaning of reality, for exercising conscience and responsibility for others, for the ability to give oneself and give your own life for the good of others and for the common good of all. Try and contrast this with this heart, with the complete invasion and occupation of your interior life that many forms of digital technologies, from social media to AI, what they rely on for their influence. Finally, last one, human dignity requires experiencing and accepting human limits. The algorithmic world promises us, sometimes very explicitly, a world without limits, a world that is perfectly controllable, a world without vulnerabilities, without weaknesses. Even death itself is to be overcome by technology. Contrast, as the German sociologist Helmut Rosa has observed, quote, "It's only in encountering the uncontrollable that we really experience the world. Only then do we feel touched, moved, alive. A world that is fully known, in which everything has been planned and mastered, would be a dead world. This is no metaphysical intuition," he says, "but an everyday experience." Now, we must resist the presumption that technology is destined to transcend the limits through which we experience really what it means to be human. In sum, I'll finish like this, saying that if we really want to respond to the war on cognitive integrity that the rerum novarum of digital things present, yes, we need to construct new norms and regulations and institutions of responsibility in our law and in our politics. But even more than that, we need to reinvigorate the human question, the same question of 3 millennia ago when the psalmist sang, "What is mortal man that you keep him in mind?" Thank you.
Ringrazio. Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor Carozza, very sincerely for joining us virtually and for giving us this contribution that was so interesting and so important that we'll surely come back to it. And I have to tell him that we wait for him in person here in Rimini as soon as possible, so that he can give us his opinions in person. Thank you, Paolo.
E allora proseguiamo.
So, moving on. Let's pass the microphone now to Mauro. We found that we live in a world where there are machines. There's a certain technical system which we're used to thinking about something that we produce, but now rather it sort of produces us in a sense. We've become we conceive and perceive ourselves of relationships that are ever more related to what machines allow us to do, and this is a kind of what you get into in your recent book, isn't it? So how do you feel about these topics we've been discussing? So I'd like to say, first of all, that we're talking about a series of processes that no one really knows, no one is able to understand how quickly they're developing, because it really is rapid, and it's I guess it's a good thing on one half. We should be humble in front of it in one sense, but we ought to understand how that we need to work together to try and understand what to do with this new world that's already been born, that it's been developing now. I'm very much in favor with what Paolo Carozza just said, and that it's fundamentally an anthropological question. It's first and foremost about people, and then it's also one of politics, of regulation. It's a technical question first, as well. But if we don't start from these human questions, it becomes difficult. The question of technology is an ancient one. It goes back to in all of human history. So it doesn't make sense when we talk about technology to either be, a pro or against. To be a technophobe or a techno enthusiast. Technology is Socrates said technology is a drug. In the Greek sense of the word, that it's something that a pharmakon that helps us resolve our problems. But also by confronting problems, it creates a new one. So when we talk about technology, we shouldn't talk about being in favor or against. We need to understand what we're talking about. We need to understand how we're creating this new world, this new technology, and what we can do to confront the challenges it's putting before us in such a way that we can value opportunities correctly and reduce the risks. So what's this tool that we're using? Where can we intervene? I'd like to put this digital thing in a kind of more historic context. Obviously, it has its own technological history. It is born from sort of cyber tech. The idea of reducing the communication or the transmission of information. So communication, like what we're using right now with words or ordered. It's quite vague. I'm trying to give a sort of more or less logical discussion. My words echo within each of you. We understand each other more or less. And we need to make the effort to understand what I've said, what you're saying. Communication is, it has some very confused elements. So the idea of kind of cyber technology is creating a system that moves information from A to B in a precise way without without any confusion. And there's been an enormous evolution in this. We've discovered, scientists have discovered, engineers have discovered that by creating some strings of zeros and ones, you can transform language and many other things into strings that then are the basis of our technology today. So this system, what is it curing? It's curing the fact in the second half of the 20th century, we've said, in our democracy, we've liberalized our sense. We've said there'll be a pope who says one thing, my dad will say another. Everyone is free to say whatever they like and to think about things however they like, which is a very important historical jump, to be honest. It's a fundamental shift we've made there. We've liberalized sense and thinking, and we've created the world's become even smaller through globalization. And so digitization is this tool that allows us to organize these vast systems that are ever more vast and complex. And on the other hand, it tries, we imagine, it's a fantastical thought to try and resolve the problems of the liberalization of sense. So, like all drugs, if it resolves problems, it allows us to create new leaps ahead. On the other hand, even if they're not used carefully, and if he uses them isn't aware of what they're using, it can make things worse. So we're entering a world where, on one hand, we're reaching levels of efficiency that are all the more advanced and all the more developed, because this is what digitization does. With a factory, we'd made our workplace more efficient. Then with infrastructure, with materials, we'd made mobility and infrastructure more efficient. And now with digitization, we're making each daily action more efficient. And to give a stupid example, I'll quote the pedometer. Everyone who's over 50 had a pedometer at the time. Some medical authority said, someone said that you should do 10,000 steps a day to stay healthy. And if at 9 p.m. you realise that you've only done that you've done less than that, then you have to think. Then oh God, I really need to go and get my steps up. No, even if you're missing 7,000, if it's raining or whatever, we set ourselves standards with things like this that make our daily life more efficient. Even for good things. Think about the advantages we have in terms of mobility, of medicine, etc. But alongside this this increase in efficiency, we now have a kind of communication chaos, in the sense that clearly we've lost all hope that with the spoken word, which is the logos in Greek, and as such with politics, we've lost all hope that we can understand each other. And this is true in relationships within the family, in business, in a movement. The idea that the dialogue, that the spoken word that can keep us in communion with each other, we've totally lost that idea. So we have maximum efficiency and also maximum chaos in communication. And that's a very difficult state to be in. So we need to be aware of this fact that if this tool makes us take some step forwards, it also provides us with some incredible problems that we've never had to face before, that we need to try and understand. And this is quite an important question. The other one is that digitization, it reduces the distance between a man and machine. Paolo said this as he finished. I don't know if any of you use ChatGPT. This summer I had a problem in my throat. My wife was away, and so I tried to ask ChatGPT some suggestions on what I could do. You know, I did go to the doctor, obviously, but I realized, and it's an incredible thing, that you talk to ChatGPT. You know, you have a pseudo living relationship with ChatGPT, and this is a reality that is a post-social media reality, because social media created that polarization that we spoke about earlier. Now with AI, we create relationships with machines that substitute the relationships we have with people, and this will create a whole series of problems that we need to be ready to confront. And on the other hand, Luciano said it earlier, digitization and new technologies, they always more include they ever more include our bodies in this system of technology that we've been building. And in digitalization has been taking huge steps ahead in terms of this. And this the famous example of implanting a neurochip inside the brain of someone who's had physical problems that allows them to substitute, that allows them to speak through this neurochip. It's a true marvel. Great, we all agree, but we're talking about a device that you put in your head, and the subsequent question is, well, if I empower your cognitive functions, how come I couldn't also sell them, sell a product that could do this? It's not possible right now, but it's obvious that's where things are going. That's my point. We've been reducing the distance between us and machines. Machines become more similar to people because we've made them to be similar to us, obviously. And on the other hand, people are becoming ever more machine-like, more and more similar to machines. And so this isn't, I'm not here to create anxiety here, but just to say that we're some generations now that are facing up a real a real turning point in history that's very difficult. Like I said at the beginning, we need to be humble. We're front of it. We don't understand everything. No one understands exactly what's happening. Let's help each other to understand, to reason, to think. And I'll come back to this idea of thinking later, because that's the key. Thinking about what is thought. But I'll stop here. Thank you, Mauro. You didn't want to cause any anxiety, but, let's say it's not like we're exactly calm here right now, but because of this, it's an important reflection on that. You've already started, Luciano, an important discussion on the risks here, but, implanting a chip in someone's head to allow to empower a human being, we can't, within certain legal systems, you really cannot do this. We have to respect certain fundamental legal principles in the systems we know, but the world's a big place, so we don't know if this isn't already happening somewhere else in the world. We shouldn't discard that possibility. So I wanted to go back to the distinction between digital and political power you were talking about earlier, disinformation. These bigger topics, how do we confront them? So, first of all, there's an ethical principle at the foundation of this, that you can't do everything, you shouldn't do everything you can do. There's a limit to these things. And we need to be careful to think that we should do everything we can do, that we could technically do. Humanly speaking, there are certain things we just shouldn't do. Otherwise, there's some fundamental points in human community would get swept away. So 2 things. You use the term pharmakon. Pharmako in Greek means 2 things. It refers first to a medicine, but also to poison. And this is an interesting thing you mentioned. You haven't used this term lightly, because we're talking about something that we can both use positively and negatively. So let's take a step back now. Machiavelli said that for a good government, you need good laws, but also good customs. It's not enough to have good governors, you need citizens. So the question we need to ask ourselves is, so us, when faced with these things we're talking about, what do we need to do? What can we do? So look, you can have all the laws in the world, but no law in this world can impede this technology from invading us. We need to be the ones to create within ourselves sort of self-defense mechanisms. If I'll give some examples here. If we have more and more a type of message that's the same message, then be careful. Think that there's something happening. If someone gets 10, 15, 1,000, 10,000 messages about the same thing, then there's some kind of operation in plan here. So be careful. And like Carozza told us earlier, he was talking about polarization. What does it mean? It means that social media doesn't have any mediators. You either have opinion A and opinion B, and this creates tension. Social media don't have any kind of mediators. Instead, the human community tries to understand how the opinions of others and find a way of mediating between themselves. In this sense, social media should be used. It should be used. It's useful, but we need to be careful because social media polarizes. You're either for or against. On the other hand, it develops that encounter within us that doesn't have the courage to manifest itself in public. But when we're on our desk, when you type to someone, you tell them things that you wouldn't say in public if you had to talk to someone live. The other thing that struck me about what you said earlier is that you were alone when you had that problem to your throat, and loneliness is an important thing here. Today, loneliness is a great human problem. There are many, many lonely people who are alone, and it's difficult to build communities in this way. As you well know, thanks to, I've been a guest of the meeting for a few years now. This is a community. The important thing that you do, and I don't know if you know it or not, is the good thing that you do particularly is to be a community. You're people who have the same feelings, who put human people at the center of a series of relationships, and who look towards the future with hope and not with despair, who feel involved in considering life. Sorry if I use this expression as a type of mission. I don't want to use this term lightly, but as a task, as a function, not to just be to be dragged along and allowed to live, but in committing to build something, to drive forward, to build our relationships. And so when faced with these types of questions we ourselves need to defend our freedom, our cognitive freedom. We defend our rights when they're threatened, obviously. This threat has a particular insidious characteristic because you don't see it straight away. You don't realize immediately, but we need to be careful. We need to realize these things. That's what I'm trying to say. We have within us some self-defense mechanisms. We shouldn't wait for the law. The law can do whatever it wants. I'll give you an even sillier example here. A mayor could do everything that's necessary to clean up a city, but if we keep throwing paper, if we keep littering, then the city will still be dirty. We have to try and reach that objective too. So even on the digital aspect, we need to come together, to concur, to work together in such a way that the digital world doesn't transform our society into a kind of a series of mechanical processes. When I read that someone asks ChatGPT saying, I've met this person, is he a nice guy? Can I continue to talk to him? Should I go out with him? But what this means is that if you're asking ChatGPT these things, you don't have anyone to talk to. Otherwise, you wouldn't go and ask ChatGPT these things to know if it's right to go out with this guy, with that girl. And how do we overcome this loneliness? But by building a community. By searching for a human rapport with people. And for this reason, I think we ought to try and think, we were talking about this earlier, we ought to try and come together to build a digital civilization. Our way of life, our civilization is very conditioned by the digital world. But we need to be careful, because the digital shouldn't condition our civilization, our way of life. Rather, our way of life should condition our use of the digital world. We need to be aware of what it means to be human beings, aware of what it means to put mankind at the center of our processes. What does it mean to commit to meeting people? What are we obliged to know and to learn? Otherwise, we get swept away. There are people who even spends 10 hours a day. I regret to say it, but I'm possessed by these mechanisms, by this technology. I'll draw out one old word. Being an old person could say, and that's pedagogy. We need a certain pedagogy, some teaching around the digital world, teaching how to use it, teaching kids that the digital world is a very useful tool if it's used well. And we need to teach people how to use it well. And I think that's what we need to recover. We need to recover this idea of a digital civilization, of digital civility, based on the ability of governing, not from an idea of who governs the country, but altogether. We need to build our digital civics, because otherwise you're a victim of digital tools. We need to be us who use the digital world, not digital things that use us. And thus we need to be very, very careful with what comes up on our phones, on social media. This is fundamental, because if we don't, it's inevitable that either political or all these kind of mechanisms we were talking about earlier, we need to be the ones who defend ourselves. This is what I'm trying to say. We need to be the ones who defend ourselves. We need to understand first how everything works, and we need to develop. And this isn't my expression, my turn of phrase. It's a kind of cognitive courage. What does it mean to have cognitive courage? The courage to let your own thoughts rule over your impressions, to use knowledge, to try and understand things, to learn, and have to have courage. We need to overcome this indifference, to overcome we need to overcome this the fatigue of trying to start a relationship. It can feel like a burden to start a relationship. We need some cognitive courage here to help us to overcome the digital world and not be dominated in turn. That's how I see it.
Mauro.
Yeah, thank you. The machines, these machines is the destiny that we have in front of us, and the radical phase of individualism if we don't manage to construct this digital civilization. I'd give this thought, start from an analogy. This is the analogy. Think of the Industrial Revolution. What happened? What happened was that humans learned how to capture physical energy, and they made some machines that did the action in such a way that replaced the human effort and were also much more powerful than our arms and our legs. The idea was that machines would have replaced persons, but above all, would have reduced effort of work. Instead, and indeed 2 centuries later, we do much less physical effort, but the real revolution, what it set off, the great transformation that happened with the industrialization, the result was we today do less physical effort, but we work much more. We work much more because this productive cycle of production and consumerism, we work much more. So what's happening? We're in a moment in which the humans have invented machines that are capable to capture the cognitive energy, if you like. And our brain is in front of digital machines like our arms and legs were in front of cars and aeroplanes. It's useless that you could say, I'll run, because the car goes faster than you, full stop. There's no discussion there. So the idea is that these machines, like back then, they will take a bunch of burdens off us, a bunch of tasks, activities, which we did directly. They'll relieve us of this burden, but the idea is to realize a society where we will be more able to think. We need to create and to imagine a society which thinks much more. And so we need to do another step. What is thinking? I can't do it in 2 minutes, but the essential. The modernity, digital is a step forward. It has great positives. We're sure we're all glad of taking part of it, but there's also reductionism there. The Ratzinger's theme when he said, and also Habermas when he said that be careful because reason is getting reduced, it's becoming narrower, it's becoming an instrument, it's becoming a calculation. Leibniz, an important philosopher, said there will come a day in which we won't discuss, we will calculate, and here we are. We've reduced ever more thought into calculated reasons, instrumental problem solving, reaching a goal. And we've forgotten that thought in the Greek culture, Latin culture, and also in the medieval culture, thought was based on this logical capacity, on the intellect, but it was also based on the dimension of the spiritual dimension. The human thinks spiritually. This dimension, we've completely forgotten it. And what is the spirit in this sense? It's not something that floats around strangely. It has two elements within which it's rooted. Firstly, the body. The spirit isn't the opposite of the body. The spirit, as Descartes said, this is our experience of living beings. The difference between us and the machine is that we are living, and we think, feeling, being aware of things, and wanting good or hating the others, and in reality. This is the first element in the spirit. The second dimension is the surprise, question, marvel, wonder, curiosity, knowing that not everything can be controlled. There's something that people have worked on, religions have worked on. So we need to go in the direction of digital civility, for a society that thinks more, that thinks, what schools do we need, what education do we need, what organizations, what public administration, what information systems. So we need to construct, and we need to do it, a society that thinks more, being aware that the dimensions of thinking have to deal with the element of relations, instrumental relationships, rationality, and also with that which we can call spiritual rationality. because it's not that the spirit isn't reasonable. The spirit is certainly reasonable. It's not reducible to the idea of reason that the Enlightenment had, or technocratic reductionism. So in front of us, we have an enormous challenge, but it's an enormous challenge in a positive way. Naturally, nobody can hide ourselves from that to do this step is going to be hard work, thinking of the state of our society. It'll need time. There'll be sufferings along the way, but I think this is a positive path that we can start working on today. Thank you, Mauro. Luciano, you've launched this idea of not the digital that dictates our civility, but that we need to construct a digital civilization. How? How can we do this? How can we inform this world of technology and not vice versa? So it's always important studying, understanding. Look, as we were saying before, these are really fast processes. What we have studied last year is no use from what's happening today. We need to reflect together around a new digital ethic. Look, this is something we haven't dealt with really amongst us. Digital within war. These are weapons, powerful weapons that are being developed. That, if they carry on being developed without global rules, they'll end up completely changing the face of the world. I'll count something very simple. Hypersonic missiles. So think of, there's a missile that hits you before you hear the sound of it, so you don't even realize. Second, some of these weapons choose their objective in the sense that it's set up to go to where there's certain people dressed a certain way. But if it sees where it's been told to go for 10 targets, if it sees more of them, it'll go in that way. So, and it's done in a way that man cannot intervene, even if those enemies are next to a school or supermarket or something. So the problem is of the ethics of digital stuff. And it's no longer, we've talked about this thing 5 or 6 years ago, we looked at it. Now it's a different project. It's one of the great questions that we need to face. And now I won't be dictating rules here, but we need to be careful that where there is a machine that escapes the control of the human people, that's a risk. There's a risk. So we need to spread this idea. We need to construct scientific tools and limits such that they avoid what could happen, like with the nuclear weapons. There's this non-proliferation treaty which had this idea of mutually assured destruction. So the first one to use it authorizes the second one, and destruction of the world. So we need to get to an international system that looks at an international treaty. We can't just be one; it needs to be everybody. On the limits, on the building and the use and the construction, the conservation of these kind of high technology instruments, because otherwise we risk, and we don't know what's happening in certain countries in the world, and from this point of view, what is China doing? What is India doing? We don't know. So what must we do? We must face this question, which is not being looked at yet, of a new ethic for digital, because this is different from what there was 5 years ago. And chatbots didn't exist. Hypersonic missiles didn't exist. War machines that are self-controlling didn't exist. So I think our task today is that of reconstructing and giving a contribution to the construction of a digital ethics for today And be careful that 10 years again, we'll need to start again, because what I've decided now won't be useful then, because there'll be another level of things. But it's important to keep up with it, not to get squashed by innovation. That's my thoughts. Thank you, thank you. I thank from my heart all of our discussants this evening, Professor Carozza from the US, Professor Magatti, Luciano, Violante. And I found, to finish up, a phrase from a French writer, Georges Bernanos, January 1000, so a long time ago, sorry, I'll miss the date. The danger isn't that of the multiplication of machines, but in the ever more growing number of men who are used right from childhood to desire that which the machines can emit to us, can give us. The danger isn't that the machines will make us slaves, but that your freedom will be indefinitely restricted in the name of the machines, of the maintenance, of the functioning, the perfectioning. The danger isn't that you'll finish by adoring machines, but that you'll be blindly following the collectivity, the dictator, the state, the party, which possesses the machines and disposes of them, giving you or refusing you their production. The danger isn't in the machines, because there's no other danger for man than man himself. The danger is in the type of man that this civilization will try and form in every moment. I find this phrase, this little piece, really impressive. The great merit of this debate on technology, digital technology, is that it's constraining us to face the question: is there something in the human that isn't replaceable, that we can't delegate to a mechanism? And this question is the question that holds up civilization. What is the civilization? This theme of dignity that Paolo raised for us. What I can say is that the fact that helps this irreducibility, the fact that a person doesn't accept to be reduced their desires, is a relationship, a community, to use a word that we've heard in these days, that has come up many times. This link, this bond that men to not reduce desire, that this thing that calls us not to reduce desire. Machines are given to give answers. What will save us are the questions. Thank you, everybody. Thank you once again for this great opportunity. Let's follow again with the meeting. Remember, where you see the red hearts, that's the only way we all know we can support that way. Thank you, everybody.
Questo è un luogo che genera dialogo,
qualcuno che si impegna, che si batte,
che approfondisce la conoscenza e sostiene la fiducia. È un crocevia dove si incontra chi desidera il vero, il bello, il giusto e il bene. È una testimonianza di speranza nel cuore ferito del presente. E tutto questo esiste anche grazie a te.